morning, everyone. My name is Sylvia Zamanillo, and this presentation is about contrastive grammar, analysis and acquisition of English grammar by Spanish speakers. In this presentation, we want to explore this fascinating relationship between English and Spanish languages, examining their historical development, grammatical similarities, and the challenges Spanish speakers face when they are learning English. Through detailed analysis of linguistic structures and practical teaching strategies, we uncover the intricate connections between these two major world languages. All Indo-European languages are descendants of a single prehistoric language reconstructed as Proto-Indo-European, spoken sometime in the Neolithic era. The Indo-European family is divided into several branches or subfamilies. There are about 445 living Indo-European languages. Therefore, it's quite understandable that at some point they share characteristics such as the declension of nouns and an elaborate conjugation of verbs. The difficulty in learning a foreign language depends on its similarity to the language of the learner. English, which belongs to the group of Germanic languages such as German, Dutch, Flemish, Danish, Swedish, and Norwegian, has become similar to Romance languages, especially Latin and French, through events such as the Christianizing of Britain and the Norman Conquest. In the 12th and 13th centuries, French was a language of literature and political and social prestige. Although English shares with the rest of Germanic languages a similarity in grammatical structure, more than half of its vocabulary is derived from Latin. Let's start our historical journey of English. English belongs to the Germanic language group, but has become remarkably similar to Romance languages through historical events. The difficulty in learning a foreign language depends largely on its similarity to the learner's native tongue. The Celtic invasion took place from 600 before Christ to 43 Anno Domini, known this period as the Iron Age, and it was the discovery of this new metal to make tools and weapons. Their language was called Common Brittonic. The Roman conquest in Britain lasted from 43 Anno Domini until 409 Anno Domini. A Romano-British culture emerged, and Latin and British Vulgar Latin coexisted with Brittonic. Latin was used by the military and official class, and therefore used as official language, although did not replace the Celtic language. The Germanic conquest took place around 449. Germanic tribes from Denmark and the Low Countries conquered England. The Jutes, the Saxons, the Angles, and Frisians, founders of the English nation, after having been dependent on Romans for protection, themselves showed little resistance. As a result, the Anglo-Saxons settled down beside the Celts in more or less peaceful contact. The Celts called the Germanic conquerors Saxons, although the term soon changed into Angli to name all the tribes. From around 1000 in the land of the Angles took place. The English language is a result of the dialects spoken by the Germanic tribes. This can perhaps be best observed by looking at the numbers from 10 to 20. As you can see, the suffix 10 is replaced by zen, such as in 10, 11. In addition, we can see this pattern in irregular verbs, such as drink, drunk, drunk, and in German, trinket, trunk, and getrunken. The Viking Age, the Germanic inhabitants of Scandinavia, closely related to the Anglo-Saxons, started their attacks upon England in 787 and continued until 850. There were three stages of the Scandinavian incursions. From 878 to 1042, a third stage took place, ending up England being ruled by Danish kings for 25 years. To illustrate the intimate relation that existed between the two languages, we can admit that the pronouns they and their and them are Scandinavian. The Norman Conquest, a linguistic revolution. The Roman conquest took place from 1066 to 1200 and had the most significant effect on English of any historical event. William of Normandy's victory meant replacing not just the monarchy but the entire nobility, clergy, and language structure. For 200 years, French remained the language of the upper classes, whilst English was spoken by the masses. The newcomers viewed English as inferior and uncultivated, creating a linguistic hierarchy that would reshape the language forever. Despite initial hostility, evidence shows mutual cooperation and intermarriage, making bilingualism quite common, especially among the prominent middle class, important for trading. The Hundred Years' War was probably one of the key factors that contributed to the eventual disuse of French in England. So the rise and effects of English in the Middle English period from 1150 to 1500 witnessed the most fundamental changes affecting phonology, vocabulary, and grammar. For example, the decay of inflectional endings in noun, verbs, adjectives, simplifying dramatically, or strong and weak verbs. Both verbs were conjugated as weak with ed endings, and sometimes both forms were kept, such as blood and blue. And threats of word integration, some coexistence between words such as smell alongside with words such as aroma, odor, a scent that comes from French. The Spanish language journey. Spanish comes from a dialect of spoken Latin brought by the Romans during the Second Punic War, 2010 before Christ. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Vulgar Latin developed in isolation in the Iberian Peninsula. Germanic people like the Visigoths ruled Spain but kept Latin as the main language. In 711, the Moors conquered the region, and Arabic strongly influenced the vocabulary, adding around 4,000 words. During the Reconquista, from 711 to 1492, Castilian Spanish spread, especially through epic poems about heroes. In the 13th century, King Alfonso X promoted Castilian by having works of science, law, and literature translated into Spanish, which strengthened its use and prestige. Let's take a look at some key features of Spanish grammar. Verb conjugations, which are reduced to 3 r, er, ir in infinitives, complex variable system with indicative, imperative, and subjunctive moods. Verb phrases can stand alone without subject pronouns. Free syntax with few restrictions on word order compared to other Romance languages. Nouns are marked for masculine and feminine gender, plurals marked by s or es, and adjectives change endings to agree with nouns. In the grammar, simplicity in complexity. One of the great challenges students face is the use of auxiliaries, third person, and the tendency to transform irregular verbs into regular ones. However, students often don't realize English relative simplicity compared to Spanish verb complexity. Inflectional simplicity. Noun inflections reduce to plural signs and possessive case. Verbs lost practically all personal endings with no singular or plural distinction. Phrasal verbs, one of the English's most idiosyncratic features, are 33 particles identified, such as up, down, off, on, out, and so on, creating non-compositional meanings. Word order dependency. Loss of inflections make English depend more on word order and prepositions to clarify relationships between words and sentences. Some remarkable parallels between languages. Despite their different origins, English from Germanic roots and Spanish from Latin, these languages share surprising similarities that facilitate learning and translation. Shared foundation, some alphabets, symbols, and many sounds, over 1,000 cognates with similar spelling and identical meanings. Abdicate, aplicar, zero, cero. Contractions, both languages use contractions, for example, in English, don't, won't, and in Spanish, al de a más el or del de más el. Similar syntax, both follow subtle verb-object order. though Spanish allows more flexibility for emphasis. Pluralization patterns are remarkably similar, like cut cuts, gato gatos. I study English, you study English. Capitalization rules. Both capitalize sentence beginnings and proper nouns, though English doesn't capitalize days and months. We can see key differences in translation. For example, according to gender assignment, or adjective position, negation, subject, omission, and preposition. So we can see, for example, in English, the apple with no gender, the phone no gender, in Spanish, yes, la manzana femenino, masculino el teléfono, adjetivo, the black suit, o the only house, el traje negro, o la única casa. I don't want anything. We have to avoid double negatives. In Spanish, double negatives are accepted. No quiero nada. I eat pasta. Subject required. En español, we can omit el sujeto, como pasta. And preposition in, on, at. But the meaning in Spanish is en for all these prepositions. The subjunctive root presents one of the greatest challenges for Spanish speakers when learning English, and it's rarely used in modern English while remain essential in Spanish. The English subjunctive declined from Old English through Middle English, and now is used for expressing a reality, wishes, and a hypothesis. And for example, we can see it with modal solutions such as may or might, he may not come, puede que no venga. Or used with short construction, es essential that they should come, es indispensable que vengan, o con estructuras como el wish, I were rich, ojalá fuera rico. From 19th century onward, the subjunctive became much less used than in other European languages like French. Okay, inversions were used in Old English, where now in modern English we have some vestiges in some contexts, for example, in questions, or in negative adverbials, or after seldom, rarely, and never, and in conditional inversions. Passive voice complexities. So the passive voice translates perfectly between both languages. However, for students, it's more complicated when they have to use the passive voice with the indirect object. For example, here we can see that is very similar. She spends a lot of money is spent by her, son mucho dinero es gastado por ella, or we are finishing this exercise. Este ejercicio está siendo terminado por nosotros. This exercise is being finished by us. So, in present perfect, Spanish speakers often struggle with English present perfect, particularly with foreign scenes, due to different separate perspectives. For example, if I say, I have lived in Madrid for 10 years, y we turn into Spanish, he vivido en Madrid durante 10 años, parece que ya no he vivido allí. So, students incorrectly say since 10 years ago, when translating desde hace 10 años. Word formation, we have remarkable similarities. We have more than 1,000 cognates, for example, doctor or a hospital, but we have to be careful with the false cognates, such as embarrassed or translated in Spanish sometimes como embarazada or actually como actualmente. So we have 9 negation prefixes in English, and also affixes. Affixation, it's sometimes very complex in English. For example, we can see incomprehensibility, and we can see all the changes that have been in process here. So we can see also some of suffixes that are very similar in English. So as a conclusion, I will say that the historical interaction between English and Spanish has created more gains than losses, facilitating mutual learning. And according to the Foreign Service Institute, Spanish is one of the most closely related languages to English, making it easier to learn than students might initially think. Because their heritage, both languages had Celts and Romance ancestors and modern connections. One half of English vocabulary derives from Latin. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have my references.